So I took a really interesting training from an organization called the Clean Energy Buyers Association. It's a fantastic organization that connects renewable providers with consumers. And they told me something that really surprised me, which was one of the main motivators for corporates, for large companies to procure renewable energy, especially the data center companies, the big tech companies, is actually employee recruitment and retention. Something that I think a lot of folks listening to this podcast know, either from surveys or from their own experience, is that especially millennials and Gen Z are very motivated by working for companies where they feel like they're making a difference.
Hi, I'm Jason.
I'm Fran.
This is Bo Peter.
And I'm Nicole. And this is Marketing for What Matters, where we explore how marketing paired with a regenerative mindset can uplift humanity, heal the planet, and still achieve profitable business growth.
Welcome, everyone, to Marketing for What Matters. I'm your co-host, Bo Lonan, and today we have an exciting conversation with Gabriel Gordon-Harper, or as I know him, my friend, Gabe. Gabe is a senior originator at Avangrid, one of the leading energy companies focused on renewable energy and sustainable practices in the United States. In his role, Gabe manages customer relationships, markets renewable energy projects, and negotiates long-term power purchase agreements, particularly in the Western United States. In our episode today, Gabe and I dive into his professional journey, the evolving trends in the renewable energy market, and the exciting challenges his team faces in the ever-growing demand for clean energy solutions. With him, Gabe brings a wealth of knowledge from his work with large data centers, utilities, and corporations, and he'll share key insights into how sustainability is reshaping the way companies operate. Plus, we'll wrap up by giving Gabe the opportunity to plant trees in a region of his choice, thanks to our partnership with One Tree Planted. So without further ado, let's jump into this fascinating conversation with Gabriel Gordon-Harper. Enjoy. All right, welcome everybody to Marketing for What Matters. Today I have Gabriel Gordon-Harper, or Gabe. He is currently the senior originator at Avangrid, a leading energy company focused on renewable energy and sustainable practices. Gabe's role involves managing customer relationships, marketing renewable energy projects, and negotiating long-term power purchase agreements, particularly in the Western United States. So Gabe and I know each other through our graduate degree program, and we also went to the same undergrad program. So it is certainly my pleasure to welcome you to the show, Gabe. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you again, Bo.
Likewise. Well, great. I think it's always lovely to get perspective on our guests in terms of why they are in the place that they are today, why they focus on sustainability or an environment in some way. So with that in mind, what inspired you, Gabe, to have this passion for clean energy and climate change solutions?
Sure. So I'm from the Central Coast, California, a region that experiences drought, not a lot of water, typically, depending on the year. But there were a few years back in the 2010s that the drought became particularly bad. We had multiple years no rain, a lot of fire, and it was pretty sad watching my hometown go from somewhat green to dust and smoky. I think a lot of folks who experience wildfire know that kind of apocalyptic summer that you can have with the ash raining down. It's hard when it's your hometown. So that was clearly a sign of climate change. It was something that climate scientists have been saying will happen in California, especially in the Central Coast. And at that point, I decided I wanted to do something about it. I was in my early 20s, so decided to go to grad school, study energy and environmental, international affairs, and marketing management in that space, and came out of it with an opportunity to join a renewables developer. And ever since, I've been very happy developing and marketing power from solar and wind and battery power plants.
Now, like you just said, solar, wind, battery power plants, I know that your history has been at a couple different places, which of course is great for your ability to get a wide perspective on the industry. But can you share the journey that led to your current role at Avangrid now?
Yeah, sure. So, coming from that beautiful surfing hometown of mine, I went to grad school where I met you. We were in the same undergrad program, though I don't remember if we did meet there. Then I probably
no, we did not cross paths. No.
But Berkeley was fun too. But yeah, met at Johns Hopkins Sci. I was actually studying in hopes of becoming a climate negotiator with the State Department. The Paris Agreement the Paris Accords had just been signed December 2016, which is when I was applying to school. But there was a shift in government. Some of us might remember in 2016 in the federal government, of the United States, a big election that occurred. The new president said he was going to pull out of the Paris Accords, and I needed to find something new to do. There was a hiring freeze in the federal government, and luckily our program was also focused on electricity markets and the energy transition from fossil to renewables. So I focused on that, got a chance to work a little with the Environmental Defense Fund, actually, focused on international aviation emissions. Also did some work in energy efficiency with ICF in New York City, but ultimately found home at a solar and wind developer in Virginia. Did a few years there using some skills that I gained before grad school in sales, selling data center equipment to go into their marketing and sales type role. We call it origination in the field. And then from there, moved over to Avangrid, where I am today, doing similar work, although I did have a brief stopover where the origination team loaned me out actually at both companies onto the project development team, where I actually got to see how these projects are built. So it was a little windy, but did ultimately get here. There's also a hostel that I owned in Morocco once upon a time when I was in my 20s, but that's a different story, and I don't know how much that led me to doing renewable energy today.
I'm sure in one way or another, it shapes your perspective, right? And when it comes to the long and windy road, it takes its twists and turns. I know for me as well. I did not think that one day coming out of that grad program that I'd be running or co-hosting a podcast on sustainability and marketing. But hey, here we are. And, I wouldn't change the journey at all. Sometimes it wasn't as easy as I'd like it to be, but hey, that's what it is, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, Gabe. Well, I know that a lot of people want to get into this field and that there's a lot of interest in working in sustainability. And so with that in mind, I'm super curious. You're a senior originator. What does a typical day for you look like? I think you got into it a little bit already. Marketing, sales, project development. What are your main responsibilities typically, and how should we understand your role?
Sure. I think the easy way to think about my role is to divide it into three parts. One is I'm talking to customers and potential customers, call those off-takers in our field. So those are large utilities. Those are large corporations who are buying renewable energy. The largest category of that being the big data center tech companies that we all know from our phones, but also other corporates as well. The third category being municipal utilities. Some of us pay our bills directly to our city government, and they also procure energy on our behalf. So that's number one, is speaking with them, understanding what their needs are, and sharing our projects and our interests in future developments. Two is bringing what I learned from my conversations externally back internal, speaking with our project developers, speaking with our strategic folks, both about what the customer is saying they want and the responses to our projects, as well as generally my understandings of the markets, of prices, of changes in trends and policy. And then third, and the part that gets most exciting, is if I'm successful at speaking with a customer and the customer becomes interested in a project, then I'm negotiating what we call a power purchase agreement, a PPA. And that's a long-term, usually 15 to 20 years contract for the customer to purchase from us renewable energy, wind, solar, battery, and for us to build a project and maintain it on their behalf. And those negotiations, those are some hefty contracts worth usually a few $100 million. So those can take some time and some effort.
Well, I'm glad that that's one of the most exciting parts of your role there. It sounds exciting for sure, especially with contracts at that size. And I think we'll get into a little bit later some of the challenges that come with that. And I'm really excited to hear. And actually, maybe let's just get started with that. What are some of the most challenging aspects of your work, and if it's around the power purchase agreements, let's hear about that as well.
Sure. So a few different challenges, really, when you think about, when you're developing, and this is probably the same in all infrastructure development, though I've only really developed power plant infrastructure, but you have so many cats to herd, right? You have getting onto the grid, interconnection. You have permitting. You have site control, getting access to land. You have ensuring that you're aligned with the customer's needs. You have procuring the equipment. You have signing the contract. You have all these different factors that need to align time-wise and cost-wise. You're making predictions as to what those costs are going to be as they're coming out. Aligning all that is quite challenging and can often, we have a joke that every project tries to die 5 times, usually at least once on the finish line. And it's true, every project does, but it's the job of really everyone in the team to find the creativity and the grit to keep a project alive during those 9, we'll call it 9 cat deaths, right? That these projects have. And I remember when I first started in this field, the development field, a friend who sat next to me over beers asked me, do you think that we're just cogs in the wheel here? Or are we actually climate additional? Are we creating a difference individually? And I wasn't sure what the answer was at the time, but after years of seeing a project developer pull a solution out of a hat to save a piece of land that's fallen out of control, right? Or a customer who comes up with a creative solution to an impasse that we're having over a contract, or an interconnection engineer who is able to connect and change the conversation and with the utility to creatively come up with a way to ensure that this project can get to its interconnection agreement on time. I really think that it is but for the grit and the dedication and the creativity and the desire of the different individuals doing this work that the energy transition can happen.
So many moving parts, and I'm glad that you don't feel just like another cog in the machine there, because there's personally, I don't find any worse feeling than that. But yeah, I know when we've talked one-on-one before, and we could talk about this as far as is reasonable here. You've talked about, and I know a lot of people listening to this show are always thinking about the ethical considerations that come with this kind of work, with any sustainability work, because there's always challenges here. Now, I know that you and I have talked about this before, that there's certainly ethical considerations when it comes to making some of these agreements come alive, essentially. And as far as you're able to, can you talk to me a little bit about some of those challenges and how you either come up with solutions or are unable to just because they do become too challenging?
Sure. Yeah. There's a few different places where ethics and sustainability, insofar as renewable energy, I think collide, and solutions need to be found, and we work towards solutions, right? One is we're developers at the end of the day. And I think all of us have an experience where a developer, whether it was for a renewable energy power plant or, a housing development or something, wanted to change the land in their community. And that can oftentimes create discord in a community, can create opposition. Similarly, and that leads to challenges, of course, in the permitting sphere. I think in those kinds of situations, what I've seen in the 2 companies that I've worked for and some of our competitors who have or have not done what I'm about to say is coming into the community early, being as transparent as you can be, and opening a line of communication that is clear and often, right, can oftentimes work to the extent possible alleviate some of those concerns with the opposition. Because ultimately, while certain aspects of the community may be being changed by adding wind turbines or solar modules, at the end of the day, there are solutions that can be had if you understand what the community's concerns are. If it's a concern about the view shed, it's not so difficult to plan a large berm, right, of trees or bushes or what have you, so the community can't see the solar farm that they don't want to have to see, a sea of glass versus an open field, right? But now they can see the trees, which can resolve some of that. There's other solutions like that. I think that's number one. Number two is endangered species. There is not a huge, it is actually, I think, to the industry's credit, that there is not a huge number of raptors that have been killed by wind turbines. And the reason for that, because it could occur, right? Raptors usually take wind paths in their migration, etc., is both good regulation, I think, that is incentivizing for the industry to build in the right places in the right ways, but also dedicated biological or wildlife biologists and permitters who I've certainly seen at my last two companies and a lot of our competitors, not all, but many, who are, it's what they come from, is the wildlife biologists. So now that they're working on getting a project permitted, they'll be very honest with us about a project that shouldn't be built because it's going to be in the path of a migratory species or cause significant damage to a habitat. And I've seen those conversations take place, and the company takes them very seriously because at the end of the day, the product we're selling is sustainability. And it's very hard to, that reputational risk and also that ethical risk in a company with the culture of sustainability is very real, that you don't want to have those kinds of negative impacts. I'd say the third challenge in that regard, or one of three of some, is supply chain. I think, we live in a globalized society. A lot of products are imported. You can't get away from that. That's, I think, okay. There's nothing that I'm looking at my desk right now that is likely completely built in the United States. And the supply chain goes upstream many levels. And there have been times in this industry, as in many, where we found that at some very high level of that supply chain, there were ethical concerns around labor practices and that sort of thing. And I've seen certainly that occurred a few years ago for the industry while I was here at Avangrid. And I saw Avangrid take some very significant measures to pay actually more in some cases to ensure that those upstream concerns were alleviated, so we weren't supporting bad labor practices. And ultimately, I also saw that the offtake community, the customer community, responded similarly and had very strict terms in their contracts to avoid forced labor, for example, in their supply chain. And we were very happy to be able to comply with that because we'd taken an early approach to that. And I think a lot of my friends in the industry that I know from other companies had done the same because that's important. Again, and sustainability is social as well as environmental.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really first of all, thank you for giving such a comprehensive answer because it really is useful for our listeners as well to get an idea of just all of the different ways that you have to think about issues like this. You can't just set up, like you said, a solar farm or wind farm and call it a day. There's obviously a lot that goes into it, like you described the planning aspect, but also the community aspect, supply chain issues, and all these other aspects of it. So yeah, no, it's really great to get a more comprehensive understanding there.
Sure. And I think it's an issue that if you're not open and honest with yourself about, then you don't address correctly. And I think there's myriad of ways to address those kinds of concerns correctly or to the extent possible. But only if you as a company, if you as an individual are being transparent with yourself with what can occur.
Right.
And how to fix it.
It sounds like with all of these agreements, there's no cookie cutter approach, and you're really continuing to learn as you go and looking for novel solutions in each of these unique situations. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, I think the cookie cutter certainly does not fly well in the renewable energy development space.
Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense. I mean, a lot of what we have set out to do with this podcast is to just learn about this industry as well, because we would like to work with more folks in this industry, and it's very broad. There's a lot of different ways to look at the environment and sustainability, and this just goes to show how broad it can be in all the multifaceted ways. And likely in your case as well, there's a big element of storytelling and how you present what you're doing, and as well just being transparent about it, because I think no one wants to get caught red-handed here with anything. And of course, we already have huge problems with greenwashing and whatnot. That doesn't really apply here, I don't think, but still, there's just an issue of transparency in these situations.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think, it's something that I think the industry can be very proud of, is that the, the, the impact on the environment has been as minimized as it could have been because of, I think, again, the individuals working the culture inside, and the transparency and the good relationship that we have with federal regulators and with local regulators, and our ability to comply and interest in complying. I speak with our chief compliance officer actually in our own contracting processes multiple times in a contracting process. Alex, I know his first name. We connect frequently. And usually when you're speaking with the chief compliance officer, what you're talking about is ensuring that you're doing something ethically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you've been in this the renewable energy market for quite some time at this point. How has the market for renewable energy evolved since your time both at Avangrid and within the industry?
Yeah, so we've seen some significant changes, I think, in the past 6 to 8 years. In the mid-teens, in the late 20 teens, the industry was still relatively kind of mid-mature, right? This is only a 20-year-old or so in an industry. So when you go back 6 to 8 years, you're kind of going back almost half of its, or a third of its life, right? It was a period where the costs curve was still coming down very significantly. I think, Bo, you and I actually took a class in grad school about the learning curve for new technologies and how PV photovoltaic modules, right, solar panels, were significantly dropping in cost and wind before that, because we were still learning how to make them more efficient. And that's still occurring, but at a much slower clip now. So the rapid decline in price, which was also aided by the fact in that time in the teens that we had low interest rates in the United States, that labor cost was relatively low, that our equipment was relatively available in the market. That has changed significantly, where prices I'm seeing are starting to climb very fast. And that's due to a number of different factors today. One of that is COVID. We had the same challenges that I think folks across industries had, with a pinched supply chain, challenges finding products. We also, in addition to that, though, had some unique challenges in our industry, where the process to get studied to come onto the grid has become very congested, because so many renewable projects want to come onto the grid, and that process was really built to handle a small number of large projects, typically fossil, right? So that's made it much more difficult to come online. And permitting has become increasingly challenging, and that in particular has challenged the ability to build out more transmission lines, which is of course necessary to build more projects where the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, which isn't necessarily where the people are living and using the power. So that combination has led prices to increase and fewer projects to be able to get built. However, the projects that are built, I'm finding now, because of the challenges that have been occurring, typically are built at a more mature, or contracts are signed at a more mature phase, which leads to more assurance that that project can make it across the finish line. In that context, though, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, which came about a couple of years ago, the largest climate investment the United States has ever made, that has had significant positive impact on the industry, giving us a lot more security, a lot more certainty about incentives and tax credits and that sort of thing. And it opened up, especially in the context of it becoming more difficult to build new projects, it opened up a whole new type of project, which is the wind repower. A repower being, think of it as a refurbishment. If you're taking the engine out of an old chassis of a car and putting in a better engine that gets you more efficiency, you can get more wind out of the same power plant, more energy out of the same wind, essentially. And with the ability now to get tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act for wind repowers, we found that has opened up new doors for being able to bring projects online at this time that's difficult to build new ones, to support an ever-increasing demand from companies and utilities that more and more are recognizing the threat of climate change, the reputational threat of not having done better renewable energy procurement, and having their 2025 and 2030 renewable energy targets coming due.
Wow, that is quite a plethora of changes in just such a short time. And it's very interesting to hear how, the demand is going up, but in fact, the supply is becoming more challenging. And one of the things you mentioned that like putting more transmission lines in place is somewhat of a solution, or I mean, I guess it's the solution, but what else is being done to get more of these types of projects online? Are there any solutions, and are those solutions in the Inflation Reduction Act or other such legislation?
So I'm generally quite optimistic, I think, for the industry. There's so much where there's demand, usually there's the ability to supply, right? It just sometimes one follows the other, and we're in one of those periods. I think the Inflation Reduction Act, what it's done more than anything for the industry is given cost certainty around what our tax incentives, what the government incentives are going to look like long term. We have about 10 years, give or take, of tax incentive that we know will come, that we can predict. Whereas before, it was usually rolling on a 3-year basis, and you never knew if it was going to be renewed. So that's a significant boon to our ability to build projects. I think, secondly, the rise of the merchant transmission line, the private transmission line being built from a place where there is high wind or solar resource, a place like New Mexico or Wyoming, to a place where there's high demand, like from New Mexico to California, via Arizona, Wyoming to the Pacific Northwest cities. Having those private companies come in and do a lot of that investment has, I think, really opened new doors. And they're also gaining access to grants from the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, for example, which is an excellent program for building out new technologies. I think new technologies is also something really exciting. We're seeing advancements in battery storage, which is super important to being able to manage the grid, have the sun shine at night insofar as energy is concerned. And then, seeing conversations on both the Democrat and the Republican sides of the aisle around permit reform that can still support the crucial, National Environmental Protection Act protections of the environment, but also ensure that permitting proceeds at a pace that is supportive of industry, of the private sector, which needs to have a clear path to resolution so that it can make a go-no-go decision. If those kinds of laws, that kind of law were to be able to take effect, I think that would have a significant positive impact also on our ability to continue and supersize the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewables.
Well, based on everything that you're telling me, I can only root for such changes to the permitting process, because I certainly know that energy demands are only going up and up and up. And of course, a consumer demand, as well as we'll talk about in a little bit, demand from companies who are using all that energy, internal demand to go to more renewable energy sources. So, going off what you're saying, this sounds like a good plan to me. You mentioned earlier that supply chain issues has been a big challenge there. How has that specifically affected the renewable energy market?
Definitely. So I think one area that's been particularly impactful is on the tariffs around importation. And I know we're talking about sustainability here, so I'll pull it back in. But traditionally, renewable energy is, a lot of the equipment comes from abroad. A lot of manufacturing equipment generally in the last 20, 30 years was imported, right? Part of the Inflation Reduction Act, part of the the goal of that law and of the current administration and of the previous administration as well, both Biden and Trump, and it looks like potentially Trump or Harris next, is to bring home manufacturing, right? To onshore in the United States, domestic manufacturing. And I am speaking from a U.S. centric position, but all my work is U.S. based. So I will, but which of course would have far fewer emissions related to the transport of goods across the ocean, sometimes multiple times, right? And has huge benefits, I think, also from a social perspective, because it's easier to control upstream labor concerns, et cetera, when the mine for silicon, for example, is in the United States rather than, in a province of a country far, far away, multiple levels up on the supply chain. That caused a lot of the implementation of that onshoring process, though, of the manufacturing of solar panels and the products that go into them, wind turbines and the products and blades and the products that go into them, batteries and products that go into them, both for electric vehicles and for commercial scale batteries, has been rocky, I'd say. You have a carrot and a stick, as you and I both know from our trade class that we took together, right, Bo? You have tariffs, then you have subsidies to bring things onshore, and you want to be careful that you don't punish the industry with your tariff before you're able to, your carrot takes effect and you've onshored. So we see some significant opportunities. There's significant benefits in terms of the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act for using domestic U.S. manufactured product, but that domestic U.S. manufactured product is still getting built out. We're still a few years sometimes out from being able to procure domestically manufactured product, but some of the tariffs associated with importing have already taken effect. And unfortunately, that's pushing up prices of energy, not just in the renewable space, but generally, I think for consumers, the lack of balance there. But I think in the coming years, once those domestically manufactured products are off the ground, are able to churn out product as fast as the international factories were, we're going to see huge benefits, I think, from a sustainability perspective in particular, because of that lack of emissions associated with transporting materials, as well as that social perspective that I previously talked about. And that's something I think the industry is very excited about, but in the meantime has really struggled with the timing of the lack of balance between the carrot and the stick.
No, I really appreciate that that lesson that you've provided us now on international trade. I'm going to resist the urge from diving in deep there for a broader discussion, but I'll just say that we'll certainly have to keep an eye on how this develops and what the eventual effect is. I'm sure that that the industry, as well as the U.S. consumer, is certainly going to want to see a reduction in pricing, especially as we've talked about already. Demand is going to keep going up, and it's a big question around, of course, will supply be able to keep up, and will we be able to do it in a sustainable manner, not just profit, sustainability, but also in lots of other ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's shift gears a little bit. So when we've discussed one-on-one before, one of the things that really stuck out to me is you talked about the different motivations for various customer segments and in their motivation to buy and purchase renewable energy and make sure that that's something that they have consistent access to. And you talked a little bit about reputational risk. You talked a little bit about employee recruitment, and I'd love to invite you now to talk a little bit more about that and why that's so important for especially the big tech companies and any other industries you'd like to mention.
Definitely. So I took a really interesting training from an organization called the Clean Energy Buyers Association. It's a fantastic organization that connects renewable providers like us with consumers, usually corporates, large companies that want to buy renewable energy. And a lot of folks in my position as originators and buyers on the other side will take this boot camp that they offer when we start, and I did. And they told me something that really surprised me, which was one of the main drivers, one of the main motivators for corporates, for large companies to procure renewable energy, especially the data center companies, the big tech companies, is actually employee recruitment and the reason and retention. And the reason for that is because you have these, they told us, is that you have these companies that are making a lot of money, right? You have these highly specialized fields that they need employees to fill, but the talent is highly mobile. So they need to find ways beyond just high pay to recruit and retain this talent who can walk away with the knowledge, the intellectual property of what they've built for the first company, right? And something that I think a lot of folks listening to this podcast know, either from surveys or from their own experience, is that especially millennials and Gen Z, who in large part are those computer programmers, are very motivated by, and survey after survey, very motivated by working for companies where they feel like they're making a difference. It's certainly why I'm in the field I'm in, and most of my colleagues are. But also a lot of my friends who have nothing to do with sustainability feel similar, and I know that the surveys say the same thing. So to be able to tell their employees and the world, we are a 100% sustainably powered company, is a very important factor for these companies in terms of retention and recruitment, according to the training I took at it's called CEBA, Clean Energy Buyers Association. Now, there are other significant motivators as well. One is the PR benefits, of course. How many times have you picked a cereal up at the grocery store and you see a little note on the bottom saying this is made from 100% recycled cardboard, right? And the oats in this packaging were processed using wind-powered mills, what have you. It makes you feel good, right? You don't want to be contributing to climate change, which is a problem that most of us are now witnessing in our daily lives. And companies understand that and want to promote that they're able to be sustainable. So they buy renewable energy credits. I think third is, of course, reputational risk. There is a lot of emissions associated with energy if you're not using renewable energy. And we all know that carbon emissions, methane emissions lead to climate change. And we all are now, like I said, seeing climate change. And no company wants to be either on the wrong side of a reputational hit from that perspective, or a large regulatory change around that perspective. And then I'd say fourth, we've been talking about the rising prices of energy, the rising cost of renewable energy, which is true in the short term and in the context only of renewable energy. But if you compare renewables to fossils, to coal in particular, but also in many cases gas, renewables are still the cheapest option. And they're the cheapest option because you don't have to pay for the fuel. The wind and the solar comes from nature. And that's your energy source. So these are still low-cost ways that a company can ensure that it's being sustainable and doing the right thing. And I think that those four reasons, right, that I mentioned, you've got employee recruitment and retention as a subcategory of great PR messaging, avoiding regulatory and reputational risk, and then the fact that this is actually, relative to other energy sources, still the cheapest energy option on the market, solar and wind, is what's driving companies to procure from us being the industry.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you again for that comprehensive answer. I'm just going to say it is that I find this immensely interesting to find out about reputational risk. Sure, that makes a lot of sense. The employee recruitment factor, now that you've told me about it, that makes a lot of sense as well. Like you said, we want to work for companies that are aligned with our values and the threats that we see in the world. Even if they're existential, climate change is a very big threat. And like you said, we are seeing these things in our daily lives. I live in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It's very clear here that things have been changing. It's not getting necessarily a lot warmer, but surely a lot wetter as the whole cycle and the pattern of the seasons is changing. And we're already a very wet country as it is. Absolutely. And I'm sure it's the same over there in Portland.
Yeah, that's the problem for us, but same. Yeah, the Western United States getting drier. Portland requires a lot of rain, as I think we all know, to keep its ecosystem afloat. Everyone's heard of the rainy Northwest, and Now we have a full dry summer out through time. Between July 4th and Memorial Day, it's beautiful weather, sometimes too hot, which is great for going outside, but not good for the ecosystem, not good for the hydroelectric dams that keep our energy cheap here in Oregon, and leads to a lot more fires. And all of that is terrible for not just for comfort of people. We've had a lot of heat deaths recently in this world where we have air conditioning, but also it's not good for the planet. It's not good for the species that live here and the ecosystem services that keep society running the way it's supposed to be running.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, well, again, I know from a lot of the things that we studied over the last years, but things that we studied at university together, is that these problems go much further than just what we're experiencing in terms of fires, but also in terms of international migration patterns, war, etc., and just a whole plethora of issues that I feel for most people are not being considered when these things come up. It's like, oh yeah, sure, the climate's getting warmer, but the threats here are much more challenging and much graver than just that.
Absolutely.
Now, to just move us along before we dive into a deep hole of despair, I'll cut this part out. So yeah, thank you for, again, just really giving us some comprehensive answers and perspectives here. I know that we, with this podcast, are really just trying to inspire people to find ways to get into industries like this, whether it's marketing or sales or origination. So with that in mind, I'm just really curious, from your perspective, what advice would you give to an aspiring professional or student looking to enter the renewable energy sector? And just what would you say to motivate them to consider it or to really go for it?
Sure. So there's motivation and there's how to get in, right? Motivation, I think, what world could you work in? What sector could you work in where you can make a difference fighting the energy transition revolution on the ground, putting the steel in the ground to clean up our grid, while also having the job security of knowing that you're working in a world where the demand is high, and you're going to be able to continue building this product, and you get to work with people who both share your mission and your passion and are really interesting, smart people. I don't go a day without learning something new. It used to be, I've learned as much in a year here as I did taking full-time classes as a student in school. It's actually pretty amazing. But then how do you get in if you decide this is a career that you want to pursue, which we hope a lot of people do, because there aren't many folks in the renewable space and we need more good folks. And I think the answer for that is people in this industry want more good people in the industry, and they're passionate and excited and motivated by being in the industry. So if you find somebody on LinkedIn that you think is interesting, that you'd like to talk to, most people I know are always willing to speak with people, give them informational interviews. I know when I was trying to get in, people were very, very, very selfless with their time in that regard. So I think that, and then finding some good energy podcasts or good energy specific news media. The industry is changing so fast, so rapidly. It's, again, only 20 years old, that we mostly get our updates from podcasts and news media. There's not really a good textbook that will tell you how things are today, right? It changed too much since it got published last year. So find that to get hip to it. And then you could do what Bo and I did and go spend a lot of money on a good grad program, or there's also young professionals programs to do transition to the field as well. So a lot of ways in, and a lot of reason to be here, I think.
So you just talked a moment ago about podcasts. We're on a podcast, and if people want to be in the renewable energy sector, let's give these podcasts a shout and give them the opportunity to learn more about this sector. So which ones do you recommend?
Yeah, sure. So I listen frequently to a podcast called The Energy Gang. Well, there's about 5 that I'll cycle through this. The Energy Gang, the Carbon Copy, the Columbia Energy Exchange, Catalyst, and then Currents by Norton Rose Fulbright. And I'd also say there's a couple of news media, online media channels that I'm following. One is called Utility Dive, about the energy sector, and the other is Canary News Media, which is specifically focused on renewables. I don't listen to all that all the time, but I'll scroll through, look for the one that's interesting this week, listen to that one, and then oftentimes Politico Energy podcast for political nerds like me gives a nice 6-minute intro to the day if you've got a short commute or want to occupy a few minutes while you're getting ready for work. So that's oftentimes what I'm listening to stay hip.
To stay hip and informed. That's certainly some things I'm going to have to check out as well. So you mentioned the young professional programs for people to get into the renewable energy sector. Tell us a little bit more about those so that we can make sure to link them in the show notes and give opportunity for people to find it.
Sure. So one great program that I didn't do, but a lot of my peers did and friends in the industry is called the Clean Energy Leadership Institute, CELI. It's a wonderful organization that you can do while you're working on something else. It's once a week, these call it classes, these sessions that they offer. They have they have one in a few different cities and then a few virtual sessions as well to learn about the energy transition, and then also to help network you and prepare you to be competitive in the space and be able to connect with the right people. So I think that's a fabulous organization. If I saw someone, I'm actually have been managing interns for our team and new recruits, and would definitely want to interview someone who'd done that program. And then my company and a lot of other companies I know in this space do these interesting rotational analyst programs for folks who are coming directly from undergrad or grad school or just a couple years into their career, where you come in, you do a few different terms of service, right, in different departments you get to rotate through. You learn a lot about the industry and about the company, and then you come back, say, to one of those departments to that begin your career a year or 2 years into your time with the company. And I think it's a fabulous program that we have. Ours is called the Global Grad Program at Avangrid, the graduate program at Avangrid. And I know that other companies have very similar programs.
Amazing. All right, so I'm going to give you one last question before we move on to the tree planting section of the episode, one of my favorite parts, which is you talked a lot about, there's a lot of excitement coming up in the coming years. There's a lot of innovations coming up. Where do you see the renewable energy market evolving? What are some of those exciting innovations that you have in mind coming up in like the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. So much, I think, good is coming in the sequel to this chapter of renewable energy. I think first, new technologies to help us achieve the 24/7, we'll call it, local energy, right? If you have a battery, I think I mentioned this a bit earlier, that can move your solar production from sunny times to the nighttime. We already see that technology is also already commercial, of course. California, especially, and Texas are implementing batteries across their grids to ensure that shoulder hour when the sun is setting and solar is turning off. Both those grids have a lot of solar on the grids. You don't see this as painful of a drop off of generation at the same time as everyone's coming home and turning on the dishwashers and the laundry machines and the lights, right? But seeing that those batteries, A, become cheaper, and B, expand in the technologies to get longer duration. Right now, the standard is 4 hours, but there's new technologies that can get us to 8 to 10 to 12, maybe even seasonal, will be a huge boon, I think, for the industry. Second, and this is old technology, but more and more transmission lines connecting different parts of the country to leverage, and the world, depending on where you are, to leverage the fact that the sun shines at different times in different places, the wind blows at different times in different places, and you can use that energy created in those different places. If you have good transmission, you can use that energy in other parts of the world, of the country, right? We see that here in the United States. you can get good transmission from New Mexico, which we're building now, to California. The nighttime wind can supply California's nighttime energy needs when their solar power goes away. They're mainly a solar focused industry. So I think that's mainly a solar focused grid. So that's really exciting. I think the build out of transmission. And then I think thirdly, the increasing creativity of the customer, especially the big data center companies. They're really always trying, it seems, to push the bounds of what does it mean to be 100% renewable? Always trying to make it more authentic in a way, more centered on the work, on the load that they actually have, the demand they actually have, to the extent that the technology allows it. So this, pushing the bounds of what 24/7 renewable energy really means, to the extent that there's wind and solar and other technologies that can support that. We see that from a lot of the big data center customers that we have. And also in the same vein, we see them pushing the bounds of the connection between social and sustainability, asking for ensuring that the projects that they're supporting have a strong relationship to the communities that they're based in. Stuff that my company's really excited about and working on with those customers, and I think some others are as well. And then I'd say finally, the new good people coming into the industry. I get to see a lot of those new people coming in because of my work with interns and with global grads, with those rotational analysts in our space. And they're so creative, they're so motivated, and they had a level of education that wasn't accessible in this field to us when we were in school, even because of how much more mature the industry is now. And I think that additional motivation that we're seeing, both on the buyer side as well as the seller side, is really making me very optimistic about the future of this space.
Amazing. Well, that's a lot of exciting innovations coming up. Again, both for you as someone working in the industry, but also for what it means for being able to supply more of the energy demands that the United States as well as the world faces, and making that more renewable and less emission based. So we are running at the end of time. So I'm going to jump right into this. Gabe, as you know, we like to do at Peaceful Media and with Marketing for What Matters, the opportunity to thank you for your time here with us today by planting some trees. And I know that you said that you have already taken a moment to think about where you would like your trees to be planted, which is Oregon. Makes a ton of sense. But tell us a little bit more about this choice and why it matters to you.
Sure. So I'd say, first of all, I love that you're doing tree planting. And the reason I love it is because the path I did not go down in the climate space was nature-based solutions. The planting of trees and other supporting or paths to support ecosystems that provide services back to society, and also to preventing or mitigating impacts of climate change is so important. I think especially because we're still trying to figure out how to create a true market to utilize, to leverage capitalism, frankly, to support the support of biodiversity and nature-based solutions. So I love that we're doing this. I chose Oregon because it's home. Avangrid is based here. I'm based here in Portland. We are a tree-based ecosystem here. And a lot of those trees, unfortunately, have been cut down to build homes like mine 100 years ago that I'm sitting in today. And I believe firmly, and I know I've spoken a lot about the United States in this podcast, and there's a lot of world outside it, but I believe firmly that sustainability and social change begins at home, right? It begins in your community. And it begins, if you're truly going to be authentic about what you are doing for sustainability, it's best when it's close to what you're actually doing, what your emissions are, what your activities are, what your daily, where you are. So Oregon, home, I'm in it now, and it's a beautiful place, and we have beautiful trees that I want to have more of them.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad that you chose Oregon. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that we could give this gift to you. So let me just go ahead and click that button, and I'm going to fill this in after the show, so you will get that gift of trees coming your way. But Gabe, thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been very fascinating learning about the renewable energy sector, your work at Avangrid, as well as the challenges that you're facing on a multiplicity of fronts, very multifaceted. We had a great discussion about how sustainability is more than just one thing, which I think is really important for us here to keep mentioning. And I really appreciate the information that you've shared around getting into this industry and how you've seen it change and how you expect it to change moving forward. So again, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure. And any last words about where people can find you or find more information about Avangrid?
I think avangrid.com is a great place to go to learn more about what we're doing, or just type in Avangrid Renewables into Google to make sure that you get our renewables subpage. It's probably a path I would take there. And then to learn more about me, my LinkedIn page, Gabriel Gordon-Harper, working at Avangrid. You'll even see that Moroccan hostel down there as the first job I had, which is kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, Gabe, we'll make sure to put those links in the show notes as well. Thank you again so much for your time, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Bo. It was great. It was a pleasure, and thanks for the invite.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast, Marketing for What Matters. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, or Pandora. Love the show? Leave us a review and follow us on social media at Peaceful Media to stay up to date about new episodes. And as always, thank you to this earth for giving us all we've ever needed. See you next time.